Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another edition. And last time we were talking with Britt Frank. She's the author of The Science of Stuck and then the workbook Getting Unstuck. And she has another one coming out June 4th. And that's available for pre-order. Is that right?
It is. I'm very excited to share that one. Yes.
Can you share the title?
That's the Getting Unstuck workbook.
Okay. Got it. So at the end of the last session, we had just gotten in to the applicability of IFS with helping us get unstuck. And as you know, I'm a certified financial therapist who's also certified in IFS. So I have a great interest in the combination of our money and IFS, and also helping people get unstuck. So say a little bit more. I mean, it really hits me as a psychotherapist. You've been trained in, I think, probably every modality that there is, or at least exposed to it. And you made such a strong pitch for IFS that it's like nothing else you've seen, how tremendously effective it is. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And as for the cynical, skeptical listeners, I have no affiliation with the IFS Institute. I don't get compensated by them. I would like to, but they don't compensate me. I'm not sponsored by them. I am just that much of a devotee of that particular way of working with the psyche. I think it gives you the most bang for your buck because it combines different things from different traditions, not just psychology traditions, but ecology and neuroscience and philosophy and spirituality. And I'm really just a big fan of that particular model. Why? Because it works. I'm a big fan of anything that gets you from where you are to where you want to go in the most efficient path possible. Life's not linear, and IFS certainly is not linear. But if I had known about this particular way of thinking about thinking, I probably would have gotten unstuck a lot sooner than it took me, because I spent years, and I think most people would agree, I spent years knowing what I was supposed to do. Don't do drugs. That's not something that's hard to know. Don't spend all your money and go into debt. Also, not hard to know, but nevertheless, there was this giant gap between the things that I knew I was supposed to be doing and the things that I was actually doing. And that gap, which the academics call the intention action gap, I just call it the sea of stuckness. That's where we all get stuck, because most people, when it comes to money or fitness or whatever, we know what to do. It's how come I'm not doing the thing that I know I want to be doing, that I'm supposed to be doing? And IFS is a solution to that, unlike any other therapeutic modality I've ever seen.
So how do you use IFS with that intention action gap? Mm-hmm. Being unstuck or being stuck. How do you apply IFS to that situation that makes it so effective?
So the thing that the question that keeps a lot of people stuck in that gap between our good intentions and our successful outcomes is this question of why. Why am I stuck? Why am I not doing that? And that dilemma is as old as time. Like, you can look back thousands of years and people in different traditions are lamenting, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and the thing I want to be doing, I'm not doing. And the things I don't want to be doing, I am doing. Like, it's even in the Bible. Like, this dilemma is a very human dilemma that's been around forever. And so the question of why, it's like, we can answer that. I'm a therapist. I'm trained to go into the abyss of your timeline and tell you why. And the metaphor that I like here is, I could tell you why this building is on fire, but we're inside the building. And so rather than analyzing how the building got on fire, how about we look for the exit and we get out and we can figure out why it caught on fire later. Why is a great question, but it is not the question that gets you across the gap. Why am I stuck? Gets you nowhere. What am I willing to do given my choices? That will get you moving across the intention action gap with no why required.
Yeah, and I am taken by that in IFS, in that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, in many other modalities, analysis is really important. It's like part and parcel of the therapy. Mm-hmm. And yet in IFS, the therapist is typically asking that part of themselves that's analytical to step back and, in your words, help the client find the exit.
Exactly. Now, if and again, I get this because I've made a career out of it. If we insist on identifying origin, a better question from the IFS lens is not why am I stuck, but it's which part of me is stuck and what's their story. That is a much more useful question if we're talking analysis than just the why. The answer to the why can be any number of things. I don't know why, but who? Which part of you? So if I want to go to the gym, but I'm stuck on the couch, why am I stuck on the couch isn't a great question. Which part of you has a story about the discomfort of going to the gym, or the fear of looking silly in front of people, or the fear of getting fit and then not being attracted to your partner? That's a very insidious one that no one will talk about, but I hear it often enough that it's a thing. So we got to figure out what part is operating here. What's that part's core fear? What's their core need? And what's their core desire? And that will help. If you must go into analysis, that's better than why, almost always.
That really softens it, doesn't it? When to your point, when I'm asked, why are you stuck, Rick? And could be a deer in the headlights. I don't know. But when you frame it to me as, well, what part of you is stuck? And what's the story that part's telling itself? That really removes it from I am stuck to a part of me stuck.
Correct. And this works brilliantly with kids. I know this is not a kids podcast, but it's so universal. If you ask a child, why did you hate your sister? Anybody who's even been around kids the child is not going to be like, well, mother, let me tell you, the origin of this trigger came and this is how I became distracted. It's like, no. But if you ask a kid, oh my God, it sounds like there's a part of you that's really mad at your sister and that part of you really wanted to hit her. What's going on with that part? Kids will tell you. We are trained out of our innate sense of our multiplicity by culture. But if you ask a kid to describe their parts, they have no, and I was a kids therapist for years, they have no problem describing, yeah, part of me wanted to hit my sister. Okay, well, now it's not this shamey, I am a bad person. It's, well, this is a part of me. And now that child can be an agent of healing. How can we help that part of you? And then the child starts problem solving and starts thinking strategically. And this is the same exact intervention for adults who are doing too much of something or not doing enough of something. It's not your bad. It's part of you has this thing. How can you and I be agents of healing and growth on behalf of the part? It's a much more efficient way to think about a problem because it solves the issue of shame, which is inherently going to produce shutdown. Like shame doesn't get the problem solved.
Exactly. So by referring to a part of me rather than the whole of me,
yes,
can help reduce that shame. And I think it's pretty effective with couples when they begin framing this rather than you are and talking in or framing it, a part of me is a spender.
Right. And this is true with like, my husband drives, he's a very skillful, safe driver, but he drives fast and I drive like a very, very slow, granny because I'm just extra cautious. And so if I were to say to him, you drive too fast, that's very accusatory. It's very shamey. Likely that's going to create defensiveness, which is then going to create, a big source of conflict. But when I can say to him, not in the car, never fight in the car. That's always a bad idea because of science in escape. Don't do it. if I say to him, hey, a part of me gets really activated when we go this fast, and that part of me has a history of being, triggered in this way, would you be willing to slow down if I'm in the car? He's going to be a lot more likely to hear that and receive that than you are a crazy driver and you're bad and I'm right and you're wrong. Part of me feels this way. Would you be willing to consider this? Is a much better way. And I learned this the hard way. That's better.
And I just had such a visceral reaction to that reframing, because it's saying the same essence of please slow down, but in very different ways.
Yeah.
And I know it's my listeners know that I've done IFS therapy I'm in my 7th year, I think now. And that I don't know, it probably took me 4 years to start even recognizing parts in other people.
Mm-hmm.
That
people
this is a part of them.
Yes.
Right?
Not the whole them. And it doesn't justify bad behavior. Oops, part of me yelled at you and I should get away with being abusive because that's just a part of me. No. But it's not an excuse, but it does help produce better communication when you can see your beloved partner as a system of parts, not all of whom are skillful.
Yes. Yeah, when you mentioned that, I thought of Flip Wilson. You're not old enough, are you, to remember Flip Wilson? His famous line was, "The devil made me do it."
Right. No. Not an excuse. No.
Going back to something that you said earlier about IFS, that it just touches so many areas, including spirituality. And I think IFS is regarded as a psychospiritual modality. Am I correct with that?
It is. I get all twitchy with these words. It's like, I don't think psychology is inherently separate from spirituality. I think all psychological interventions are psychospiritual. But if we have to use big words in order to get research and studies and evidence-based whatever, fine. But I don't know of a psychological intervention that doesn't have a spiritual component. If spirituality is defined as the search for truth in all of its forms, what's more spiritual than the search for what's true about me and for me? Who am I? What do I want? How do I operate? How do I become the person in charge of this flesh meat suit versus reacting? I can't think of a more spiritual endeavor than the search to understand one's own mind. So that's long-winded. Yeah, it's a psychospiritual approach.
That's long-winded, Britt, but I have never heard it framed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some psychologists
would argue very, very, very aggressively against that. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I remember the first time I heard that was that the Enneagram was psycho-spiritual. And I've done a lot of training in the Enneagram, and I never viewed it as such.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but I think all things are spiritual. Fitness is biological spiritual. Diet, what you put in your body. I mean, I'm a holistic practitioner. I think the more we separate these things, the more likely it is for the human shenaniganery of control and power dynamics to enter it and then make it something gross. But I do think IFS and even if you're just, is my thinking based in error and bias, or is my thinking based on accurate data? That's a spiritual endeavor because you're looking for what's true. But that's just take what's useful.
To that point, you are not a diagnostic psychotherapist that uses the DSM-5 a lot, I'm guessing.
I'm trained to. We all are trained to, right? And the DSM, which I had a very good professor in graduate school call it the doorstop manual because it's great for holding the door open, and that's about it. The DSM is important because the medical pathological way it looks at our experience does give people access to insurance coverage. So fine, if you need a DSM diagnosis in order to get your insurance to cover your therapy visits and your whatever, I don't care about that. But behind closed doors, when you and I are talking, here's your DSM diagnosis, but often what the mental health world calls a disorder is actually a brain doing what brains are supposed to do, which is respond in a way that preserves life. that prevents death. So anxiety is a key one. Anxiety, and hot take, and don't send me angry emails without going like into all my disclaimers. Anxiety is not a disease and it's not a disorder. Anxiety is it's not fun and it can become a problem, but anxiety is the check engine light of your brain's dashboard. Anxiety is not the disorder. Anxiety is the signal pointing to a problem. So same thing like the smoke alarm, for going back to the fire metaphor. When a smoke alarm goes off, it's really unpleasant. It's loud, it's disruptive, it's screeching. But like, I wouldn't take my house to a doctor and then say, my smoke alarm is going off. What's the problem? Oh, well, you have smoke alarm disorder. Like, that doesn't even make sense. It's like, no, the alarm's a signal. You have check engine light disorder. Like, no, your light's on. Let's look under the hood and figure out what's up. Like, that's how me, as well as many, many other people, are learning to view what we historically have called disorder or disease. And there's only been 5 DSMs. Like, in how many years? Like, there's only been 5 updates to it. Think about if your brain or your phone only had 5 updates and then you're done. It's like, no, I don't use the pathological disease disorder model of mental health.
So anxiety is the warning light that
Correct.
something else needs to be addressed. And therefore, perhaps, I'm thinking of anxiety reducing drugs, and I'm not suggesting that they're not helpful in getting somebody through a really tough period. But with your metaphor, it's like, well, let's give my car some type of a override so that the engine light will stop going off.
I used duct tape when I was in my 20s and I was broke and I couldn't afford to fix it. I just didn't want to see it. So you put duct tape over it. And again, I'm not anti-medication. Do what you need to do. Use all your resources to help. But anxiety is not the problem. So medication might temper the symptoms down temporarily. Those meds have a very short shelf life before they stop working. And then you need to take more of them. And then that creates a whole nother host of problems, way worse than the original anxiety. Yeah, like you can tape over your check engine light, you can disable your smoke alarm, but that doesn't solve the problem.
That's great. I'm thinking of all the groups I've seen that are about anxiety and reducing anxiety, maybe even CBT methods of reducing anxiety. And nothing against that, but I'm almost seeing this, that it's really trying to reduce the symptom, and not the real issue.
Right. And we're trained to think of it like that. But again, when I take my car to the mechanic, my goal is not, you need to turn the light off, even though obviously I don't like the light and I want it to turn off. It's what's wrong with the car, fix it. And then once we do that, then the light will turn off. But the light is just the starting place that gets you to the mechanic. The light very quickly becomes secondary. But the mental health world is the light is on, therefore the light is the problem. And now the light is your disorder. So let's turn the light off and wonder why things aren't improving. Like, the model is pretty not fully awesome. And again, I have respect for CBT and I have respect for every branch of the field because everything is useful. But especially when it comes to anxiety, it's so misunderstood. It's been taught, I was trained to view it pathologically. Like, if you're anxious, it's because you have anxiety disorder. It's like, no, if you're anxious, it's because you have some problem either right now, in the future, or in your past that needs to be addressed. And
so how does IFS address that?
So how does anxiety, or how does IFS work with anxiety? So one of the fastest ways to slow down the flood of stress hormones that come with anxiety are to separate. Anxiety is not me. I am not my anxiety. There is a part of me who has feelings. And if I can separate that I am not this part is not me, then I can observe the anxiety. And every single mindfulness school on the planet has shown the act of observing changes, and science has shown this too. When you can observe a thing, it changes the nature of the thing. Sometimes just observing the anxiety and noticing it is enough to reduce it to the point where then you can access your choices. But the first order of business that IFS will do is, well, which part of you is feeling anxious? Where do you feel that part in or around your body? How do you feel towards that part? And we have all of these tools that allow us this separation not like an exile, like go away, anxiety, banish your anxiety. No. It's, I see you part that's anxious. Wow, you look like you're having a rough time. How can I help? How can I help? And sometimes that's enough. Often it's not, but it's a wonderful starting place.
Yeah. So of course, there's anxiety around money is ubiquitous.
Oh, yeah.
Our society is full of that. And so for those people that feel anxiety around their money, that's a warning sign, is what I'm hearing, that something else is going on that needs some attention.
Which is annoying. And I got annoyed when I first became financially more literate. I won't say literate, I'll say more literate than I used to be. Is, money, like anxiety, is often the symptom, not the problem. Like, I have no money. If I just had more money, I'd be great. Well, how often do people go on the wheel of, all right, well, now you have more money, but you have the same problems. They're just bigger. And now I have more money, and now you have the same problems. They're just fancier problems. But money is and I'm not saying money is not needed or important. Obviously it is. But money is often the symptom of a problem and not the problem itself. But our culture trains us to look at the dollars and cents and go, that's the problem. It's like, is it? Or is that the manifestation of the problem?
Yeah, exactly. The subtitle of the podcast is, it's not just about the money.
Yes, exactly. Right.
And this is just fascinating for me when I'm acting as a financial therapist, is that we go often back to childhood, back to some traumatic experience. And I use traumatic very loosely as opposed to real clinically. And it could have been about some incidents that had nothing to do with money that is now symptomatically coming out in the way one is spending or addressing their money.
Yeah, all that stuff about worthiness and value and shame. And even if you had perfect parents, which nobody did, and a perfect childhood, which nobody does, you're still going to pick up messages about money from culture that are not accurate. And so even if you had the most pleasant upbringing of all, if you've got money problems as an adult, it's because somewhere in there, a narrative got installed to parts of you that we want to find out and figure out, and then uninstall and reinstall new operating software when it comes to money.
That's a great way to frame that. Beautiful, because so many of us, and we call them in the work that I've done, money scripts. In IFS, we'd call them money burdens. And these are these extreme beliefs. We don't know they're extreme. Or the part of ourself that believes that, it's truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then come to find out that oftentimes it may be true in certain circumstances, typically when we were kids, but we don't get a new operating system when we become adults.
Right. Which is such an interesting design quirk of the human brain. But fortunately, we can consciously uninstall and reinstall and upgrade our systems. But we have to start by challenging like what you call scripts or burdens. Sometimes people just think, well, that's just life, like that's just life. And it's like anywhere there's an assumption that's that broad in general, it's likely that there's a burden or a money script at play there, because very seldom are things just what they are with absolutely nothing that can be done about it.
I love that. The upgrade your money operational system, or your money operating system, MOS.
Your MOS, I love that. Yes, absolutely. And I've chosen to do that. And it really makes a difference in how you relate to money, how you think about money, how all of it, because we can't live in our current world without having a relationship with, and I hear people say, I just wish I didn't have to think about money. It's like, well, that's not a choice. That's not on the list of menu options. But the more you reframe and reprogram and reinstall money scripts, it's less torturous and it's less bad to work with.
Yes. Yeah, you just described the person that has money avoidant money scripts. And we all, there's money, you talked about the money worship a little bit ago, with more money will make this go away. And then there's money status, that my self-worth equals my net worth, and money vigilant, with being fearful to talk about money, being secretive about money, hating debt. They're usually the people that do have some money, not 100%. And interestingly enough, a lot of anxiety goes with that type of money script.
I've seen those people coming into my office for their anxiety disorder. I'm like, you don't have an anxiety disorder. You have a money script that needs to be challenged and addressed and uninstalled and reinstalled. But okay, I can give you that DSM diagnosis. So you have insurance coverage, but let's get down to what's going on here.
Beautiful. I think this has been so insightful for my listeners. Just a plethora of things that we could go back and unpack. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and share your experience and knowledge and wisdom in all of this. Tell everybody where they can go to get in contact with you and get your books.
Yes. So my book, The Science of Stuck, you can buy wherever you buy books. The Getting Unstuck workbook comes out June 4th, but you can pre-order it now. And you can find me on my website, scienceofstuck.com.
Great. Britt, thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to chatting again.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.